she is the last but not the least, I would say. It's Sunny Bonnell. Hi, Sunny. She is the co-founder and CEO of Motto, a global branding agency based in NYC. She's the co-author of the best-selling business book called Rare Breed. Amazing book, by the way. I have read it. I would recommend it to anybody. Woohoo! It is in the giveaway later on. So, you know, a lucky someone will get it. She's a columnist for Fast Company. She's worked with companies like Virgin, Google, Microsoft, and Hershey's. She's been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, the Wall Street Journal. And anyway, all of this to say, she has a very impressive background, and I will let her share her screen, and I will give her the mic.
All right. All right. Hey, everybody. All right. Let me see if I can navigate this. Okay. So let me make sure. All right. Should be able to.
Go ahead. Yeah, you should be able to share your screen.
All right.
Perfect.
Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Perfect. 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 All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Creating Big Ideas. Great to see everyone. Looks like we've had a good group of folks here tonight. And thanks so much for picking up a ticket. It sounds like this has been kind of a jam-packed session. So I guess I'll hopefully close the night and spark everybody's inspiration. I've had a lot of Red Bull and a ton of M&Ms, so I'm absolutely ready to go. Let's see. So I'm assuming that everybody's probably already introduced themselves and where they're from. So if you want to say hello to me in the chat, I will be very, very thankful, so I can just kind of follow along and see who everybody is. But let's just dig in, because I know that we have a lot of ground to cover. So what do I hope that you will get out of this? Well, first, my work and my career has largely been based around helping other people, including clients and now mentors that I mentor a lot of entrepreneurs and young leaders. And really my kind of what's driven me the most is this championing of big ideas. So I hope that out of this today, I will be able to share with you a lot of my experience around what it means to champion a big idea. How do you create a big idea? How do you get people really excited about that? And why are big ideas really at the center of the game that we're all in, which is some of you may, work in in-house teams, or you may have your own creative career, or you work directly with clients, or whatever you may be, whatever role that you're in. I'm assuming creativity is at the heart of it, but we all have to, throughout our own lives, have to get people to buy into ideas that we have. And no matter what that transaction is, we're always sharing ideas. We're always trying to get people to buy into those ideas. And really, before we can get people to buy into our big ideas, we also have to believe those ideas ourselves and really believe that there's something innate within them that's going to inspire other people to want to join and support that cause. And really, because great ideas really surface in the stretch zone, not the comfort zone, it's always important to understand and ask yourself, like, am I really pushing myself? Am I really pushing my big ideas? And am I stretching myself beyond the boundaries of my own limitations? And lastly, learn the principles for what and how you arrive at big ideas. And so we'll unpack a lot of this in my particular talk. So Caroline, you did a really good job there of introducing me, but there may be some information about me that you don't know, which is I'm obviously the co-founder and CEO of Motto, which is a global branding company. We power some of the world's most innovative companies to champion big ideas and really help them leap to what's next. We specialize in strategic branding, primarily now for tech companies, although I've worked across many, many verticals in my career and probably worked on just about every branding challenge imaginable, but really have found kind of a sweet spot with people who I like to call the ascenders, which are people who are like a rocket ship kind of taking off and going up and really kind of you feel their energy and momentum. And I really like to latch on to that because I feel it's very exciting. And so tech companies for me have a lot of that type of unique DNA. And then as Caroline said, I'm also an author of Rare Breed, a guide to success for the defiant, dangerous, and different. So if some of you don't win the copy, but you want to pick up a copy. It's great for people who have been told their whole life that they're too something, too much of something, too rebellious, too emotional, too something, right? That's too hip for the room. And how do you take those so-called vices and actually leverage those and turn those into your virtues? So it's a great book for those of you who might be wanting to really tap into that side of yourself and really unlock it. So for me personally, I've always been just really fascinated with the concept of ideas and like where they really originate from, and not just any ideas, but really audacious, daring ideas. And, my story, you pick me up probably in my early 20s. I drop out of veterinarian school to start a company in my early 20s with $250 and no prior business experience. There's absolutely nothing about that story that says I would be at all remotely successful. So the fact that I did that was quite a jaw dropper to a lot of people around me, because for my whole life, I said I was going to be a veterinarian. I was like one track. I'm going to go to vet school. I'm going to be a veterinarian. And so it made no sense that I would drop out of vet school to literally start a branding company in early 2005. But that's exactly what I did. And there was a lot of doubt surrounding me, in particular, my co-founder, because a lot of people thought we were too young and too female. We were too something. We were too naive. We didn't have enough money. And, that doubt in our early career could have either sort of really shadowed how we felt about the work that we were doing, or it could unlock something within us that would really drive us to prove those doubters wrong. So that's exactly what we did. And really, that's how we started Motto back in 2005. I think we had something pretty significant, which is vision. So even though we didn't have maybe the, Ivy League degree, and we didn't necessarily have all the money in the world, and didn't certainly have a whole lot of business experience or some founder that we could look up to, what we did have was vision, and we had a lot of guts. And I think that those two things in particular, and probably a little bit of naivety and probably foolishness at the same time, all mixed together, made for a recipe of two women who are just like gonna go straight at the world. But that's how Motto began. And we asked ourselves really early on, we saw kind of an alarming lack of companies that really were asking themselves the question, which is, what is my purpose? What is my vision? What is my big idea? And so we set out to create a company that would try to unlock that, not only in other people, but also unlock that in other types of leaders. And we asked ourselves, how do we create a world where visionary leaders are the rule, not the exception? Because frankly, there's not a lot of visionaries in the world. There's actually a pretty staggering statistic that only 0.1% of all people are actually considered a visionary. So that's basically 1 in 10,000 people, which is pretty staggering. So that means that not only can we learn some of this visionary thinking, but could we actually help our clients and people that we were mentoring and working with? Could we also help them unlock that within themselves? Was it something that could be learned, something that could be honed? So at this point in our career, we've now probably worked with over 1,500 companies across 60 different countries. And just one thing that we've seen time and time again is there's just an alarming lack of vision at the top. And so I think a lot of our work today is just really trying to champion that in others and really champion it in the companies that we work with. So what I want to share with you today in terms of what we're going to kick off on this little jam that we're in is the power of big ideas. And I think it's good to have kind of a baseline of like how I see big ideas, and more importantly, how do big ideas get unlocked within ourselves and within the companies that we work for or with. And the world's greatest companies are ideas. So they're more than famous names and coveted products. They're ideas. They're ideas that started in the hearts and minds of a very few fiercely ambitious people. And those big ideas become something. They end up touching millions of people's lives. And each one of us, whether we're in a company or we're in a role or we're in a creative career, it begins as an idea. And where does that come from? Well, it has to start from the inside out, right? It starts from the head of a visionary to people around them to help them get and buy into that idea. It also can start from, say, the DNA of a leader of any kind of company, or even if you own your own company, it's probably an idea that you had. You saw a vision of you working for yourself, or perhaps you joined an in-house team and you were like, this is the vision, this is where I want to go. But it can also start from a personal fire, which is like, okay, this is the kind of career that I want to have, right? So that's a vision, but you sort of paint the future in that you hope to lean into. And that's where really big ideas start to stem from, and how you ultimately take that further. What you're going to see here is that in a lot of creative careers in particular, if you work, as I said, in an in-house team, or you work for your own company or whatever that is, the truth of the matter is there are ideas everywhere. I personally, in my own work at Motto, I take a lot of our new business calls, and I probably hear, on average, I would say anywhere from 50 to 100 ideas a week. And everyone thinks that their idea is going to be the next Zoom, the next Google, the next, it's just something that like I just hear on a regular basis. And there's not a lot of proprietary thinking around it, because I hear versions of the same idea again and again and again. And that's when I really realized that, okay, you've got all these ideas out in the world, but what brings all of these sort of disparate ideas together is this idea of finding kind of like a red thread, right? Like, what's the thing that sort of connects it? And at Motto, we call it the big idea worth rallying around. Now, you've probably heard this idea of rallying around. Actually, this started from us in the media in like 2004, 2005. We used to use this phrase a lot, and we started to see it catch on. But at Motto, we call it the big idea worth rallying around. And that's what a motto is. A motto is a war cry. It's a reason to get out of bed. It's a reason to champion a cause. And here's the thing I want us all to remember, that we're all creatives, but we need to start thinking and working more like visionaries and less like only creatives, because creative is one aspect of it. But as you get further and further into your career and more of the things that you want to do, it's all about trying to champion a big idea, champion a vision. And the more that you lift your thinking up above that horizon line of, oh, I'm just a creative, you realize that your value increases, because now you're not thinking about the doing, you're thinking about the thinking before the doing. And that's all really, really interesting. And that's what I do a lot of in my mentorships, is I really try to help entrepreneurs and creatives think bigger, because I'm very surprised by how often small that we think. We think big in our hearts, but then when it comes to real action and real doing, it's really hard to do that, because doubt creeps in. We start to hear, maybe we run these crazy ideas by friends or colleagues, and they're all like, that's crazy. And then you sort of just like shut up and keep it to yourself. But that's where the real gold is. That's where the real power is in an idea. So when we think of an idea, these 4 words, by the way, I believe are the 4 most powerful words in the world. I have an idea. How many times do you say that during a day? I have an idea. And the power that rests in those 4 words is so incredible, because it means it's the beginning of something. It's the spark to something, right? It's the spark to innovation. And what are really ideas designed to do? Well, they're designed to solve problems. And innovation is so central to the way that we're all thinking right now. It's become almost talismanic. When you think of innovation, when you think of a big idea, you sort of have these images probably that come to mind of like Nikola Tesla, like, slaving away in his workshop, or you think of Jobs and Woz, like first creating that first computer in their garage in California. It's like innovation is really the engine that drives everything that we do. And just about everybody wants to either be an innovator or a big idea thinker, or at least they understand the first commandment of big thinking, which is you either innovate or you disappear. And so the question I always have is, but why are so many companies like really bad at this? Why are so many people really bad at big ideas and bad at innovation? Well, they know how to do it, and they know that they need to do it in order to stay competitive, but they seem to be unable to champion these big ideas or get a big idea sort of released into the company or even champion within the company. I don't know if anybody can empathize with this. Maybe some of you are a part of an in-house team, but sometimes it's really hard to get great ideas pushed up and pushed through. I know people that are really, really talented and really smart who are like, I can't even change the phone number on my business card without having to go through like 90 people, you know? So it's like just the amount of red tape and the amount of friction that big ideas often create is something that you know is worth noting. And it's something that we see all the time. And I think as designers and creatives, it's just one of the biggest problems that we have to help our clients with, which is we know that ideas will take us further, but nothing is more crushing than having a big idea and not fully realizing that big idea. And I see it all the time. I see it in, you know, friends and colleagues. I see it in the clients that we work with. I see it in the people who want to champion those big ideas, how hard it is to get the idea. I have an idea into something that can be actually executed and realized. And more importantly, what do you have to do as a human to be able to deal with the amount of failure that comes with trying to innovate on a big idea? You have to be pretty tough, you know, to be able to withstand that type of pressure. So what are big ideas? They're agents of change, right? Big ideas are agents of change, and they are at the heart of big impact, big career moves, and a lot of transformation. And the difference between a lot of those big ideas being an agent of change and ultimately being able to change the opportunity and those who are going to become undone by it comes down to one thing, and it's usually willingness and courage. And I use the word courage really importantly because the only way that big ideas often get realized is that they have to have persistent courage. It's not enough to just be courageous with the idea. You have to have the tenacity and the persistence behind the idea. And it has to often be somehow rebellious, nonconformist. It has to sometimes be a dangerous idea, and really to get other people to see your value. And by dangerous, I don't mean like dangerous in the common sense of the word. I just simply mean that it's so radical that people go, whew, like that feels slightly uncomfortable, but in a way that's good. It's a good feeling, because then you kind of know that you're onto something. And that's where big ideas can often be super realized. But again, you have to be able to get people to not only say, when you say, I have an idea, well, that's when the chain of events begin to sort of take place, because then you actually have to get people to buy into the idea, support the idea, and give it enough lift so that it becomes something. Because it's usually not one person that can champion that idea alone. They might be the vessel for it, but they need people to support it in order to realize it. So I mentioned this earlier about when I talk about big ideas, I talk about the signature idea that sits at the heart of a person or sits at the heart of a business and makes it famous. And at Motto, we call it the big idea worth rallying around, as I mentioned earlier. And some of you may notice that this is also our tagline. So we use it and we preach it a lot, but it's primarily underpinning everything that we do. When somebody comes to us and somebody works with Motto in particular, we always try to get to the heart of like, what is the signature idea that's going to get people really excited? Not like a mission statement or a purpose statement, but an aspirational idea that you haven't quite leaned into and haven't quite it's just beyond your grasp, but it's enough, it's aspirational enough that people actually get their hearts racing and they want to try to help you build that. That's the idea worth rallying around. You might call it something different in your work, but for the purposes of this talk, I want to kind of talk to you about how we define what that is and how we often work with teams and companies to sort of extract that, and how you might take some of these lessons away and apply it to your own work. So even if you're creating a logo or creating a brand in-house, or you're working with a client to refresh, your work should always start with a big idea. And it better damn be worth rallying around. Like, those are the two fundamental things that you need to remember. It should start with a big idea, and it better be strong enough and powerful enough and aspirational enough that people actually want to rally around it. So we have this cool little diagram, if you will, and like, what are the three kind of components, if you will, that make up a big idea for us, or the way I see it. So on one side, we have internal. So this can be, let's say you're a part of a company, you work for a company, or again, maybe you own your own company, and maybe it's just you, or maybe you have a couple of people that you work with or freelancers that you work with, whatever the sort of intake of that business is, there's always like an internal inside out type of part of this diagram that's actually really important. And that can be things like leadership or employees or recruitment or investors. And that really makes up like whatever's happening inside your company or your career. And you can think of it as your career as well, that there's an internal component to that. And it usually, if you're a solopreneur, that might reside with you, right? That internal piece is like you are the vessel for your business and your brand, your personal brand, and the things that you're trying to do. And it also, if you eventually get a new employee and maybe you start partnering with somebody, or maybe you even start growing and scaling your company and you have a few people, that internal component is really, really important. And at the center of that is the idea worth rallying around. And then to the right of that is external. So we think of it as almost two parts, right? You have internal and external, and external is everything that everyone else sees. So you've got this kind of internal sort of culture directive, maybe founder or person that's, designer that's sort of sitting at the top. And then you've got this sort of external piece, which is like what everybody sees around it. So it's maybe your customers see that, or it's your brand. It's the way you communicate. It's the way you're on social. It's how society kind of perceives you. And right in the middle of that is that big idea worth rallying around. What's really interesting about the way that we do it is a lot of people actually think that they're two separate things. So they might sort of think that it's like, okay, internally, I'm going to have this one directive, and then externally, I'm going to be this other thing. And that's where you get into a lot of murky territory, because if those two things aren't aligned, you can't actually anchor it with a big idea worth rallying around. You have to make sure that it's omnidirectional. And what I mean by that is it's going inside and out, right? It's like, it's aligned, and it should be what you say inside, and it should be what you say outside. And it should never stray from either or. And if one is out of alignment, you will always feel it, and it'll always reveal itself, whether you realize it or not, whether you struggle because you haven't codified that yet, or people on the outside can't quite make up who you are. If they're not clear who you are, it's because that idea at the center of the business or the brand or the company, or, you can apply this to anything, right? Your career, wherever. If any of those things are out of alignment, you will not have alignment with the big idea worth rallying around. So it's really important that those things are omnidirectional and that they're one and the same. When we think about what is the criteria for a big idea, this is also really important. So a big idea for us is like an idea that's big enough to matter. There's a lot of pretty stuff out there, but not a lot of things that matter. And it's very important that the big idea matters. So number one, it should feel both instinctively obvious and yet somehow new. This is really tricky, right? Because it should feel fresh, but it should feel familiar. And you kind of go, well, how do you do that? But you know it when you hit it, because it actually, again, that alignment between both internal and external, that's when you know that it's like kind of right under your nose, but it's the articulation of it. It's the expression of the idea that gets really interesting, and where you can really play with that. Number two, it's an idea that gets the brain firing and the heart pounding. We've all heard a lot of ideas like, hey, I want to take a nap, right? That's an idea. Or I want to put people on Mars. Very different. They're still both an idea, but one of them gets you pretty excited. You're like, what? Mars? That sounds crazy. Or I want to create, a toaster that winks at you. All of a sudden you're like, that's interesting, right? So that is kind of, your brain has to fire a little bit differently, because you're trying to understand how that's a possibility. And that's what big ideas do. They stretch, as I said earlier, remember I said, like, it stretches you beyond the comfort zone. That's what big ideas often do. They kind of stretch the elasticity of our thinking just far enough that we eventually go, hold on a minute, that's a bit odd, and then you're like, but tell me more. And it's because we've stretched your thinking a little bit to something that doesn't feel comfortable. And that's where big ideas often come from. Number three, an idea that a single brand can own and 1 million people will buy. It's a big one. An idea that's compact enough to remember, but bigger than any of its parts. Also very important. And last but not least, an idea so charged and so exciting that others will champion it without you having to ask them. So that's also important, because most of the time, think about how many times we have to drag people along, like pull them uphill, right? Because we're just like, we have this cool idea, and they're like fatigued because they've heard 50 other ideas and they're not sure which rabbit to chase. The point of a great idea, when an idea is so charged and hits all these boxes that I've outlined here, what happens is you notice that people want to join you. They want to help you build it. And you don't necessarily have to convince them. And that's a really important note, because you don't want to have to strong arm people into helping you or to champion the idea. You want them to kind of willingly want to do it. And that's important. So the impact of big idea thinking, and I guarantee you've all felt this one way or the other, but when you have big ideas and you have big ideas thinking, guess what happens? Well, people can own the idea. Everyone moves towards the idea. Others champion it without you having to ask. More is done faster with less and less resources. Energy is optimized because people are really, even when it's tiring, they're still supercharged because they want to build that big idea. And you're a magnet for other big thinkers. When you don't have it, it's draining. No one understands the idea. Everybody's kind of pulling in different directions. You have to drag people along. You can't get it done even if you had a village. Energy is wasted. You attract average thinkers. And so when you have big idea thinking and you approach everything you do, every project, every small thing that you do, and every big thing that you do, if you approach it with big idea thinking, it completely changes the way that you approach everything. And you will leave out of this talk and you will go and see your work in an entirely new way. And that was my goal. I want you to completely think about this in a new way, in a totally different way, because you're going to come at this and go, well, Sunny told me like that this, it shouldn't feel this hard, right? Big ideas shouldn't feel and be so draining that like people just don't get it. That's when you know you've got the wrong people or you haven't articulated your idea well enough. So it's about packaging the idea and it's about getting the right people around it. Because if you have the wrong people around it, it will take, you can hire an entire village of people and you still will not be able to get that idea off the ground. So what is then at the top of idea thinking? Well, it's vision. So vision is the highest form of leadership and creativity. It is the single most important governance tool that you have in your arsenal at any given time. It is the most powerful, effective tool that you or a company can possess is vision. It's at the top of everything else. It's at the top of creativity. It's at the top of design. It's at the top of leadership. Without vision, you can't create anything because you have to have vision in order to do that. And so your job, if you're either working on a big idea or you're trying to create a big idea, your job is to find the difference. What is the difference maker in that idea? And a great vision should really read like a new reality and get everybody excited to build it. And it really is at the center of big ideas and strategy. And it's the biggest reason that many clients hire us and probably hire some of you is like all we do all day long is solve problems for other people. But if vision is not there, let's say you're working with a company and you kind of go into that and you go in to solve a problem. And you're like, okay, like they've given me a great design brief and I think I've got this. The reason that sometimes those projects fail is not because the brief wasn't good enough. It's because somebody didn't have vision. So if the person at the top that you're working with or who hired you doesn't have vision, guess what? It's your job to bring the vision to the table. I can count on every single digit that I have how many times I work with companies where vision is not anything that they even know how to articulate. And sometimes they'll even put it back to me and say, what is my vision? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, who knows? You don't know it, but let's find it. And sometimes our job is to create that vision because there is no vision. So when you're trying to get to the heart of a big idea, you also have to have vision. You have to be able to either make up for the vision that you lack or pretend, or you at least need to get it from some other source. And it may be the person in the C-suite, maybe it's somebody on the design team. Somebody needs to be the captain and the keeper of the vision, because without it, it's hard to do anything worthwhile. More importantly, vision unlocks big ideas. And as brand strategists, as creatives, as word wizards, we sit at a very important precipice, which is the client knows that they need help. That's why we're there. And they know that their nascent idea needs support to grow, and they're looking to you to provide it. And what you have to show up with every single time is vision. You need to unlock vision either in yourself or the person that you're working for or with. And if you can look around your team, say you're in an in-house team and you're looking around and you're like, well, who's the keeper of the vision? You'll know, because you'll know that this person is probably a little bit of a wild card and is probably always like way up in the clouds and probably couldn't execute an acorn if they wanted to, but they are visionary in their thinking. And what they have to do is have people around them that are executors, because the executors and the doers are the people that are really going to help somebody who's visionary be able to close that gap and build that bridge. You, as whatever role that you're in, whatever you're doing, is you are the dot connector. The best creatives do not just tease out insights or spit back to people what they heard. The best dot connectors in the world are people who add value, who connect the dots, who create clear pictures, who cast vision, and who create big ideas. They are people who take what they heard and go make something out of it. But if you're being hired to just kind of spit back to people what they already know, you're not being a value add. You're not being a value creator. You're just sort of spitting back otter notes and telling them what they just spit out to you. But what you want to do is try to connect the dots and actually bring value to what you heard, which is very, very important. I see the chat is like blowing up. And if you're saying anything to me, I'm probably missing it. All right. All right. I see a bunch of stuff here. Let me just check in. Okay. This is gold. All right. You are a few minutes over, FYI. Okay. Got it. All right. I'm going to wrap up. So really quickly, I live by the 5 C's, and I tell teams to live by the 5 C's. That is create value, connect dots, convey clarity, cast vision, champion big ideas. Take a shot of this, take a screenshot of it. Keep it with you wherever you are. It is the most important thing. Put it in a sticky note and put it on your notebook, your computer, whatever. And remember that your job in any situation is to create value, to connect dots, to convey clarity, to cast vision, and to champion big ideas. And the more you can do that, the more you will find your value goes way through the roof, because now you're not just a creative or a designer or this or that. You're actually bringing an arsenal of tools to the table that make you absolutely indispensable. And how do you get to a big idea? Well, first of all, you need to ask this very important question. This question right here on the screen is probably the most important question that you can ask yourself or ask anyone that you're working with. Don't ever ask anybody what they care about. Ask, what are you fighting for? And what are you fighting against? Because it's not about what you love and what you care for. No, it's what you're fighting for. What will you go to the mats for? And when you understand that, when you ask that question, you will find that so many of your questions are answered. You will understand what they care about and what you care about. And the reason that this is so important is we cannot help our clients if we don't understand what we as individuals are fighting for. If we can't answer that in our own brands, in our own career, in the work that we do, we cannot help anyone else. The minute that we get clear, the minute we can help others get clear. The more we stay unclear, the less and more unclear we become for people that we try to help. So think about this. Ask this question, what are you fighting for? I have a few sort of takeaway tips, maybe 5 minutes, but I don't know if anybody wants to stay on. I can just skip to the end, or if we want to let me run through them, I'm happy to do that.
So we have a panel after this.
Okay. All right. So I'll jump to the end here. So I'll leave you with this question, although I had some pretty good tips. And if I can get everybody's email list, or if you want to email me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to send you what some of these cool takeaways were that you can maybe apply, that I sort of use when I'm thinking about how to create big ideas, how to show principles of big idea thinking, and how can you apply that to your work. Feel free to send me a DM. But for that, I'm out. Off you go to do big things. Connect with me. at Sunny Bonnell or at We Are Motto or at wearemotto.com. Thank you all for allowing me that very blazing performance to share my big ideas with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunny. That was amazing. Like so much information, so much food for thoughts. That was really great. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.